Well, hello. Welcome everyone to the Inclusive Career Advancement Program's Education as a Pathway to Employment, Breaking Barriers to Success. This is the lunchtime session. Um, and so people are going to be trickling in and out for those of you at home. Um, if it gets kind of weird out there, it might be because we're waiting for people to find a fork or what have you. So uh, don't mind that. But welcome. Glad you could join us today. Gotta figure out how to advance these things because that didn't work. There we go. That didn't work either. There we go. So as we start today, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that this is a presentation that is funded through a Disability Innovation Fund, which means that we have a disclaimer we need to announce to let you all know that this publication is not intended to represent the views or policies of the Department of Education, um, and it's required of all of the presentations we provide. So hello, everyone. My name is Sabrina Cunliffe. I am the DIF Grant Manager for the Oregon Department of Human Services. It's part of vocational rehabilitation. ICAP stands for the Inclusive Career Advancement Program, and I am joined by my colleague.
Hello, everybody. My name is Natalie Dorfler. It's very nice to meet you. I work as the Inclusive Career Advancement Program's research analyst. I do all things data. Thank you so much, Sabrina.
So what is the Oregon Inclusive Career Advancement Program, or ICAP? You'll hear us refer to it. Is a partnership between Oregon VR. We serve as the project lead, and then Cornell University, the Yangtan Institute. They provide our evaluation component and also our training and our technical assistance. Um, Fantastic partnership with them. Oregon Commission for the Blind, because their VR agency is separate from the Oregon agency. And then for our community college partnerships, we partner with Portland Community College, who is the sub-awardee to the 14 other community colleges throughout the state. So our learning objectives today, we are hoping to have you recognize the value of post-secondary education for people with disabilities, particularly VR clients. Identify some policy barriers that we came across along the way, and how we mitigated some obstacles. So far in this project, we're on year 4 of this project, of a 5-year project. We're going to explore all of our collaboration strategies and how we've coordinated services with the different community colleges. And then hopefully you will realize the impact that post-secondary ed can have on the quality, employment, the lifetime earnings, and self-sufficiency for the people that we all serve. So the goals of ICAP. When we started out in October of 2021, we said that we wanted to support at least 500 people with disabilities across the state of Oregon, including those from marginalized communities, so Black, Indigenous, people of color communities. We would help them to choose a career pathway in one of our partnering community colleges. We then help them access that post-secondary education, whether that was financially or with other sorts of supports, help them to participate in internships in high-demand careers, obtain that credential, and then follow them all the way through to successful employment. So those are the things that we're monitoring, tracking, and building our processes around. Examples of career pathways, in case people don't know what that means for us. In Oregon, the career pathway system is built what's called Pathways to Opportunity. There's about 190 different certificate-based or associate degree-based career pathways throughout the community college systems in Oregon. There's everything from building inspectors to childcare, bioscience technology, mechatronics, manufacturing, music, sonic arts, all sorts of very interesting programs that are anywhere from a couple of months long, which are really convenient for some folks, up to 2 years. And so those are the levels of training that the program is supporting. The intent of the program is to have people get careers, not just jobs, right? Part of WIOA said that we're going to move from just getting people a job to getting them a job that they want, that pays them a family wage, that's worth it to them. So, how do we do that? We actually get them some credentials that employers in their local area want to build an actual career that's stackable so that people can continue to grow and learn in an industry over time. And this creates, economic mobility. That's the really important part that we have um, for the people that we serve. And so, what we were seeing in Oregon before we were granted this award, or that most vocational counselors in Oregon um, would have someone come into VR, and it would be about getting them a job, any job, right? It didn't matter what that job really was, and we really didn't have a culture locally of how to support people through post-secondary education. I want to say that we had, oh, kind of telling on ourselves, but the worst measurable skill gain rate in the country, if not, maybe it was the second worst. We were ahead of maybe one other state in out of all 50 states. And so, how would we change the culture of Oregon VR and just the daily work that a counselor does to support post-secondary education and think about credential attainment? And so, this is the process that we went through to do that. The importance of post-secondary education for people with disabilities. Natalie's going to get into more details about why we do this work.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. I'm going to bring this down. I'm very tiny. Hi, everybody. It's Natalie Dorfler again. It's very nice to be here today to talk to you about the importance of post secondary education, especially in regards to people with disabilities, how you might be able to utilize your own vocational rehabilitation supports for long term economic growth of our participants. So, just to begin, we're going to be getting into some broad stroking data, national wide data that we can see the benefits of post secondary education for people with disabilities. The first benefit I would like to pull your attention to today is that it enhances their access into quality employment. So, this is data that is directly taken from the National Center for Education Statistics. This data shows that people with disabilities who have started or obtained a post secondary recognized credential, like those career pathways that Sabrina was talking about earlier that exist within Oregon, are more likely to enter into jobs in the healthcare agencies, within computer information science systems, within education, training, that could look like peer support specialists within Oregon, and library services. Also, just to pull us out of that national lens and into our state lens within Oregon with ICAP, we are very aligned to these popular career pathways. Our participants within ICAP trend most significantly towards computer information science systems trainings, education trainings, and welding trainings as well. Whereas people with disabilities, again, this is from the National Center for Education Statistics, people with disabilities who are high school non-completers or completers who did not continue into a post-secondary education are more likely to enter into jobs such as building and grounds cleaning and maintenance, transportation and material moving, and construction and extraction. And I would just like to note as well that this National Center for Education Statistics identifies that this population in this second bullet point has a 0% entry into the agency and jobs provided in that first bullet point. So it is immediately cutting off the quality employment that they are able to receive as someone with a disability in our country. Also, post-secondary education for people with disabilities enhances and increases their lifetime earnings. This is something we are also seeing within our ICAP data that I'll get into in a couple of future slides. So just a quote here for you. 25 to 64-year-olds with disabilities, their employment percentages for those who had not completed high school are at 15%. For those who had completed only high school, their employment percentages are 22%, and these are lower than those who had completed some college. That employment percentage jumps to 31%. If they have an associate's degree, that is 35%, or a bachelor or higher ed degree is 45%. So we go from 15% for students with disabilities who have not completed their high school training, and we jump up by 30% for their employment margin if they are entering into and completing a bachelor's or higher ed degree. One of the other benefits, again, these are broad stroking, national-wide data that we can see is being supported when our participants are entering into post-secondary education, is that this promotes self-sufficiency of our participants. This is another thing that we see quite a lot with our data that we are collecting within ICAP. A lot of our qualitative data will comment on the confidence levels of our participants at the beginning of their training with the community colleges and have been identified to be quite low, both by our vocational rehabilitation counselors and our partnerships with the community college. Those are our career coaches, who we'll talk about again a little bit further in this presentation. But they are both able to identify a significant increase in a participant's ability to be self-sufficient post their post-secondary education training. Okay, so as much as I would like to stand up here today and talk to you about all of the wonderful benefits of post-secondary education for people with disabilities, of which there is quite a few that we just talked about, there are also quite a few barriers. We are talking about an institution that has not always within our country historically been set up to allow and benefit from to have this population kind of enter into and benefit from these services. Some of the barriers that we were able to identify, both within Oregon vocational rehabilitation prior to the ICAP program and its implementation, and also that is supported from nationwide data as well, is that there is a significant financial constraint for our participants with disabilities when entering into post-secondary education. One moment, please. So another quote here for you is that adult with disabilities are 2.5 times as likely to be living in poverty than those who are without a disability. And this is from the National Disability Institute. So that's already quite the barrier that our participants are experiencing in order to be accessing post-secondary education. Also within Oregon, there was a lack of knowledge level with our vocational rehabilitation counselors and their understanding of the financial aid options that are provided locally within each community college, of which, again, we have 14 participating in our ICAP grant. So that awareness of what the financial aid options could look like for our participants was low, and limited support on how to obtain those for our participants. There is also, when we're talking about higher education as well, there is those systemic inequalities, there is discrimination that our participants experience, lack of accessibility and stigma. Just to talk a little bit about, again, this word intersectionality and what that means. Intersectionality is a theory. It was developed by Kimberly Crenshaw. She coined the term to describe how different systems of oppression, such as racism, sexism, and classism, intersect to create unique forms of discrimination. And this is a compounding effect. So when we're thinking about what is an intersecting identity, just I will pull your attention really quickly to the image that we have on the right hand of this slide. So an intersecting identity could look like someone's disability, their religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, their gender, age, race, ethnicity, and their culture. And again, these are compounding factors that could create more barriers based off of how we have our social system set up within the United States. Another thing that we were able to identify as a barrier is gaps in disability support services within the post secondary institutions themselves. They operate as independent agencies, specifically within Oregon, and more frequently than not, the accessibility and accommodation options between those colleges look much different than they look similar. So, a lot of our participants who we can see in our rural county areas might have less access to accommodations that will help support them through their post secondary education than our participants who are located in our urban, more regional based areas. Also, one of the barriers that we were able to identify prior to ICAP is that we are asking our participants to navigate very complex systems. So, already we are asking a participant to enter into post secondary education. We are asking them to navigate a complex academic system. I went to college, it was very confusing for me as well. You have infrequent appointments with a counselor who is able to help provide clarity, and again, not frequently. And on top of that, you are also then attempting to learn and get your degree while navigating through those complex systems. And what our participants with disabilities, they have an additional complex system that they must navigate, which is the accessibility and accommodation offices that again are provided much differently throughout the schools. So I don't want to say it's all doom and gloom, though. We have done the work, and I would like to share some of the strategies that we utilized within Oregon vocational rehabilitation with ICAP that was very helpful in addressing some of these barriers. Some of the procedural changes and training that we identified was significantly needed for both our vocational rehabilitation staff as well as our community college partners. Was regional trainings for our VR staff in regards to how to navigate the community college systems, what financial aid options were available, and with our community college partners, most, if not all, some had very limited access and understanding of how to work with people with disabilities at the beginning of our grant. So we started with a lot of training on how to provide services and education to our participants. We also, like Sabrina mentioned a little bit earlier, told on ourselves a little bit within Oregon, could be doing much better with our vocational rehabilitation when it comes to credential attainments and measurable skill gains. These are things we know are happening. We know that these participants are receiving these measurable skill gains and these credential attainments. However, what we are seeing in the data is disproportionate to the work that our counselors are doing. So the conversation and the cultural shift became, how can we get this data entered in, worked into your workflow so that it's not an additional burden, but it instead is showcasing the work that you are already doing essentially 24/7 for your participants. Also, we changed some policy language. We identified at the very beginning of ICAP, I believe it was end of year one, if not beginning of year two, which is actually when we began serving participants. Our first year was just creating and hiring of all of these folks. And our second year was when we were beginning to serve participants at the community college level. And we started identifying a slow role of enrollment into our program. And we started asking, and by we, I mean Sabrina, asked some really important questions of why? Why is this happening? Let's look at our policy. Let's see the changes that we could make as an agency and what barriers might we be implementing without knowing that could be inhibiting our participants' access into post-secondary education. One of those things that we changed, or altered, was that we really wanted to build upon our trust that we have within our vocational rehabilitation counselors. These are very educated people, most of whom who have master's degrees and are very understanding and can comprehend and guide a participant through their own training. We had a policy that needed manager approval, I believe at any level for post-secondary education.
Yeah, I would say that the policy was written in such a way that it tended to how do we rule people out of post-secondary ed instead of how do we rule people in, like things where you must do this, and there was a checklist for counselors. And so if you're a VR counselor and you've got 150 people on your caseload and you're trying to support somebody in post-secondary ed and your own agency has created these systemic barriers just for you to be able to write a plan and to pay the bill and to do all of those things, what we did is we just took a look at that and we slashed it as much as we could. We simplified it. We took the language from, how do you get to a yes is now how the policy looks and how it reads and how it feels. And so with that, it just really empowered counselors. We put the decision making back in the hands of the counselor. They didn't have to, no longer they go to their manager to get their plan approved or go to the regional manager or the director of the agency. And we said, you know what, these are competent counselors. We're going to trust them and we're going to trust their judgment. And we're going to hope that they write plans that really center the client in their work and not the policies and procedures in their work. So how can we stop being a barrier as a VR agency?
Sabrina? And just some preliminary data, what we were seeing with ICAP specifically was a surge of enrollment once this policy was shifted to put more power into our VRCs' hands. So that, again, they didn't have to jump through all of these hoops that our participants weren't even aware of, right? This was not something that was impacting personally any of our participants, although they were receiving the effects of that, right? This was something that was completely done within our agency. Participants were unaware of this policy, unaware of the policy change, and yet we doubled our enrollment in less than a year once this policy change was enacted. One of the other strategies that we would recommend is strengthening your support services. So, what we did when, again, we're talking about navigating those multiple complex systems on top of one another while you're also just trying to get your training and complete successfully, very difficult things to do. And when we, again, think about intersectionality, these are compounding effects. They don't minimize, they instead stack upon one another. So, how do we strengthen our support services locally so that we can provide that support and try to take that lift and that load off of our participants? So, we integrated academic and disability support with on site career coaches, again, at all of our 14 community colleges. These are your one stop shop, essentially, of our participants for how to navigate this community college system. These are subject matter experts who understand their own complex systems, are very forthright about the fact that they are in of itself complex, and daily they assist our participants in just navigating through that so that they can focus on what's most important, which is their training. We also, within vocational rehabilitation, created subject matter experts, and they were designated to post secondary education. So, again, we are providing that agency support to our VRCs who this might be a new system, a new process for, that cultural change into post secondary education post 2008 in the recession, instead of just getting people into jobs or wanting to instead provide that vocational counseling. So we created and assigned this role to one of our vocational rehabilitation counselors who we identified was really doing this work quite successfully. We also, this is quite a recent change, but we have implemented 4 vocational rehabilitation counselors who are our ICAP VRCs. They only work with our ICAP participants. And this is, again, a new thing, but it's been very exciting, and we are seeing quite a bit of an enrollment difference here as well. And Sabrina, would you mind talking a little bit about the financial barriers and kind of where we're at with that?
Sure. So another thing that we had in Oregon is that we have what's called the VR unmet need. And when someone wanted to go to college, they would fill out we'd get their financial aid award from their institution, and then there would be this formula that we would need to use in order to find out how much money we could contribute to their tuition fees, books and supplies, transportation, all that stuff. And it would automatically deduct any grants that they received. So we would have to deduct if they got a Pell Grant, for example. We would have to deduct that from what it is that we could pay. And what we were noticing when you think about the intersectionality with poverty is that if they were allowed to keep their Pell Grant and use their Pell Grant for their living expenses, for their increased cost maintenance, all of those sorts of things, students without that poverty barrier trying to go to school and actually had a little bit more walking around money did far better. And so we changed our policy to allow for us to not subtract the Pell Grant from their VR unmet need. We, of course, recently have had a little bit of trouble with that because we needed to update our Oregon administrative rules to reflect that. So it is on hold, but that is the ultimate goal, is to not over-resource folks, but to definitely get people to where, everybody's the last payer, everybody's the last payer. How do we braid those services more effectively? How do we actually get more money into the hands of the student to be successful? So that's another policy strategy. I think we gotta move because we're gonna run out.
Oh, shoot. Thank you. Okay, well, next slide then.
So collaboration opportunities. What does it look like at the community college level? What have we done to build that relationship between vocational rehabilitation and our local community colleges? So I think one of the best things that we did was in fully embed ICAP within the actual VR program. So it's not something that's separate and apart that then we would need to integrate later, but it's something that we built with staff that existed within Voc Rehab already, and that we trained the entire state on what ICAP was and how it worked and the importance of it. We created what are called local implementation teams. So those are teams that are at each of the 14 participating community colleges around the state, are teams that meet at least monthly, that have the career coach, which is the person that we've hired and instilled at the local community college, that runs, meets with the client on a regular basis with the vocational rehabilitation counselor. They have local meetings about all of the things that happen at that community college, and they continue to build that relationship with their financial aid offices, with their business offices, with their accessibility services office. They invite special guests. They think about how are we reaching marginalized populations. They set goals, and they do that at that really local level. So those local implementation teams where they work well and they collaborate well are having huge impacts for both VR and the community college. Then we have the statewide community of practice. So that happens quarterly. That's when we bring everybody out of their local implementation teams and we bring them into one big meeting on a quarterly basis, usually held over Zoom, where we share best practices, new problems, new issues. We're able to make sure that all the subject matter experts on the VR side and all the career coaches on the community college side are talking to each other, have the same shared information and knowledge. We also have once a year, sometime in the summer, we have a in-person meeting where all of the local implementers, so again, all get together and learn together and talk about goals for the next year and accomplishments from the year before. Then we have what are called point of contacts in each VR branch. Um, I, Again, all of these acronyms were placeholders that became permanent. And but we have a point of contacts in each branch. And so those are a person assigned at each branch level to be the person for all of their peers, all the rest of the voc rehab counselors in their branch, to have a point person to go to in that branch to ask questions. They're the ones that we can't have everyone in the state come to every ICAP meeting or ICAP training, but we can have one designated person come be that person and then share that information with the rest of the people on their staff. And then we have also joint efforts at the statewide level about how to access vocational training, how to build career pathways that are more suited for people with disabilities, what sort of internships are available and make sense for people. All sorts of career development opportunities happen with the leads from the community colleges and the administrative people in VR about how to grow our partnerships so that this sort of relationship building sustains post grant. So some people wanted to know more about what is this career coaching? You have career coaches, and really all career coaches are fantastic in that they're 100% dedicated to helping people with disabilities on a college campus have one person to talk to navigate. They don't have to go to the financial aid office and then go to the accessibility services office and then go to figure out how to pay their bill and then have to figure out how to access the career center and then the tutoring center. You know how a community college campus or any college campus really can have all of these different departments that are very siloed in their work and don't necessarily talk to each other and don't necessarily have a disability lens associated with it. This is that person that can really be that warm blanket that wraps around that individual. And, you know, we've had clients that this is their first time ever stepping foot on a community college campus. And that process of just taking that first step and stepping onto the curb of a community college with an anxiety disorder is the hardest thing that they've ever done. And when they have a career coach that meets them at the curb and walks with them into that admissions office, shows them how easy it is to apply for school, shows them how to apply for financial aid, all of those things that maybe we take for granted because we've had different supports in our lives or different experiences that allowed that to be more natural. These career coaches are able to walk alongside every step of the way with our ICAP participants and then also serve as this really valuable liaison to the VR counselor back in their office, glued to their chair, trying to push that paper through that they need to push through in order to serve the individual, right? And so this partnership between a career coach being there, checking in as often as that student needs, being a real live person on campus to help support that client has really been the success of ICAP in many ways. They also then do a bunch of documentation and reporting and then feed that to the VR counselor and to Natalie for evaluation purposes. Um, and then they coordinate with lots of community-based organizations that, that might benefit students. Like one example is we, had a transgender student that really needed to have accessible bathrooms on campus. And so the career coach was able to navigate that on behalf of that student and have that student feel safe on campus. Those sorts of things where they're really looking at the whole person has been really great for a lot of folks. So that's what the coaching model is. My grant. Yeah. My grant. The RSA's grant. Yes. Um, uh, Collaboration-led refinement of processes. I don't remember this slide, but I am now.
You talked about it a lot.
Oh, did I already talk about it? Oh, okay. So yes, we have the quality practitioners meetings, LIT participation. A big problem that we had early on was a referral process. Um, we had we had issues where people were applying for VR services and then getting lost in that referral process, and sometimes it was taking 2 or 3 months for them to get an intake, which would kind of derail their momentum. And so we instituted a process where they referred directly to the ICAP program, and then we got them to the subject matter expert in the local branch around the state within 2 weeks. So it caused a little bit of controversy because to some, it felt like maybe they were jumping to the front of the line. But what we saw was much higher engagement of people whenever they had quick access to the VR program, and that we were serving as a pilot to show that real rapid engagement with VR led to better success for clients rather than calling up and then waiting several months to be served. Then again, we also had the LIT participation and then the VR and policy and process issues that Natalie talked about earlier that we addressed. So what's the impact so far of ICAP? Let's get into it, Natalie.
So, what we are looking at right now is essentially how ICAP has been developed. This is the foundation that we are built off of as a program. This is the PDSA model. PDSA stands for Alphabet Soup, I know. Plan, Do, Study, Act. So, this is a change improvement model that we have utilized within ICAP and was implemented by our fearless project manager, Jamie Butcher. And did I say it wrong? And it has been very instrumental, is a big reason why a bunch of those policy changes that we've been speaking to have even been able to be implemented within our program is due to this PDSA model. So in the planning stage, you are defining your objective. You are asking questions and predictions. What is your why? Why are you implementing this change within your program? Why is it important and needed for your participants? Who is needed to do this work? Who's going to be accountable to these changes? And again, that data collection piece, supporting your conversation and potential argument for policy change with data is very effective. In the do stage, you are carrying out the plan. You are documenting problems and potential unexpected observations. And I will just say, sometimes there's quite a few, and that is all right. You are also beginning your analysis of the data that you are collecting. Study sounds exactly what you are doing in this stage. You are completing your analysis of the data. You are comparing your data to the predictions that you made in the planning stage, and you're summarizing what was learned. In the act, you are asking what changes need to be made for the next cycle so that this is, again, a continuous improvement model. This has been especially helpful within our Oregon VR agency, as it is an easily defined path for leadership to be able to identify the workflow that is occurring within the agency and the potential pitfalls and shortfalls that may be occurring that we need policy change for. So again, this informs our yearly ICAP project management plan, which is our key to the kingdom. In our project management plan, we have everything documented that we will be doing in the next year, that we did in the next year, who was involved, who was accountable to that work, and the potential changes that we need for next year so that we can be more successful moving forward. So this is how we know that we're getting things quote unquote right as we are implementing our statewide program. How do you know you're doing well? This is how we can provide that data. Also, really quickly, this led to and supported the development of accessible real-time data dashboards for our program, which I am about to showcase. These are very new for our agency. The conversation of how to be a data-driven, data-informed agency and how to get that real-time data to our frontline staff. This is something I think that has been quite innovative, to say the least, for our agency and has been very helpful in conversations about our participants. So how do I move that over? Oh, it's up there. Perfect. Never mind. Look at this ICAP data dashboard. Yay! So, thanks, Sabrina. So, we are currently looking at our statewide ICAP performance dashboard. This is new again for our agency, for our frontline staff to be able to look at and see real-time data of our program. This is going to be even more real time than the data that I will show you in future slides. In just less than a month of when I submitted this presentation, data changes rapidly. We are doing work every single day, and it's integral to our frontline staff that they are aware of those changes so that they can promote the work in the ways that they need to. So this talks about our participants who we have enrolled in ICAP. One of our objectives of our grant is that we have 45% engagement into our Black, Indigenous, person of color community within Oregon. So we identify how we are doing towards that objective as well. On the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see our current training completions. So of our participants who have enrolled into ICAP, who has successfully completed their training, their credentials that they've earned, who has achieved employment. We are seeing about a 2 to 3 month gap between participants who successfully complete their training. Holy, thank you. Into average weekly hours worked. I'm going to move on. Yeah.
So this is the same data that we saw before, only in a different way. This is how you can see the enrollment of the different colleges. Feel free to click the link if you have, you all have access to this PowerPoint. These are the different disability demographics that are also on that dashboard that we're able to see. Um, we're just going through these quickly. That's all right. That's all right. So the biggest news is that we went from 2% of VRCs engaging in ICAP. My personal reason for taking on this project was to see that shift in VRCs supporting people in post-secondary ed. At this time, 79% of all VRCs in our state have now written at least one plan for ICAP, which is great. And 51% of them have written at least 3 plans. ICAP students have enrolled in over 25,637 credit hours in over 111 different unique educational pathways across the state. Most common, again, are welding, early childhood education, peer support, computer information systems. And then we're going to end real quick with a video. Now, if you're watching this live on the Zoom out there and the audio doesn't work, we would like to apologize in advance. We tried for about 10 minutes before this to see if we could get the audio to work. If it doesn't, you have access to this PowerPoint. Please go and try and access that independently, but we're going to go ahead and see if we can play this video.
I love my job because this is my dream job. I think about it every night before I go to bed. What am I going to work on and stuff?
He always lights up every time I see him. And the first thing he will tell me is, I love my job. I love my job.
So our main company here is PJ's Truck and Trailer Repair. We work a lot on trucks coming off the freeway or they're broken down on the freeway. When we interviewed Logan, he listened very well to what I had to say. You could tell that he was going to be dedicated. He's very patient with us. We're very patient with him. If he doesn't know what he's doing, he will come and ask somebody.
Logan is very happy, and he always, always makes you feel good for helping him.
I love working with Diane. She actually got me some really good jobs in the past.
He went independently with his support staff up to Blue Mountain Community College. He explored the certificate programs they had and told them he wanted to do the diesel mechanic program.
And I went to BMCC in 2023. I joined the diesel mechanic program to get an education on diesel mechanic, and I got good grades. Basically did the year certificate.
The Kirkwood sat down with him and went through the syllabi for the diesel tech program to make sure that Logan fully understood not only what he was going to learn, but what assignments he would have to work on and when they were going to be due to help him be successful.
I actually had a list for school that I had to purchase, and Diane helped me purchase them. She did a lot of work, like getting tools and stuff. They're like wrenches, socket wrenches, everything for the job.
The state of Oregon provided him with a full set of Snap-on tools so that he could work and be successful in his program and in employment. After that, vocational rehabilitation was able to support him in finding a job as a mechanic here with PJ's Towing and Mechanics.
Logan's main job here is to work with our other mechanics and try to learn as much stuff as he can. He has been really good about keeping himself busy. You could just tell that he really wanted to be here. Those are the kind of people that we like. Money is great, but you got to enjoy what you do too. Getting Logan here and getting him familiarized with everything, it has been pretty easy. because he's so willing to please that you show him once and he stores it in there and it happens.
I recommend VR because they help you get a job. If you're not able to do a certain task, they'll find the right job for you.
If there's people out there looking for employees, check with VR. There's good people out there that are ready to go to work.
Go to school, get an education, and put your heart through what you want to do.
He finally found home. He found where he fits in his career life, in the universe, makes him happy, and it makes me happy.
Okay, thank you so much. I believe that we are 2 minutes over our presentation. Oh, we're not? Did we go till 1:30? Oh, so cool. All right. Well, I apologize again if you weren't able to see that video or if it was not closed caption. But please do access our presentation. I believe you're able to utilize that through the agenda, the online agenda.
This is still playing.
Oh, what the heck? All righty. And I do see, yes, we have a question. Do we have a microphone to?
I just wanted to know if ICAP serves students with low incidence disabilities as well.
We serve all people.
All
with
people, so
disabilities.
Intellectual disabilities,
All-
autism, everything.
all of- They
Great.
still have to be able to complete the rigors of the career pathway that they decide. So part of that comprehensive assessment, right? We look at the career pathway, we look at what that student has, interest, abilities, strengths, resources, priorities, concerns. And then different schools have different levels of supports that they can provide. And so again, like all VR, it's all individualized and all client-based, but we don't exclude any particular disability from service.
Thank you.